Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us today. In just a few minutes, we will get started, but first, I wanted to cover some housekeeping items for today's webinar. Everyone has been muted. If you have questions, please ask it in the question window of GoToWebinar. We will try to get to every question either individually or aloud during the Q&A session. Once the presentation begins, some people have issues seeing the slides advance. If that happens to you, just close the webinar and then rejoin. That usually fixes things. We are recording today's session and we'll share the link with you after the webinar. It usually takes about a week for it to be available and posted to YouTube. We are now ready to get started with today's session. Joining us today is Kevin Poorman, Developer Evangelist at Salesforce. Over to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Amber. Let's start our topic off this morning with this forward-looking statement slide. It serves a dual purpose. First is to remind you that we are a publicly traded company and we need you to make all purchasing decisions based off of generally available features and functionality. And secondly, it reminds me not to make any forward-looking statements. So with that said, let's jump into this. If you want to get us on social media, you can find us at Salesforce Devs on Twitter or Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube as Salesforce Developers. You can also use the hashtag Lightning Platform if you want to discuss today's webinar. I am Kevin Poorman. I'm a developer evangelist here at Salesforce. I've been using the Salesforce platform for about 10 years. And you can reach me at kpoorman@salesforce.com, or you can hit me up on Twitter at CodeFryer. So with that, what are we going to talk about today? First, we're going to start and talk about the Lightning Platform, what it is, and what it can help you do. We're going to talk about data modeling and custom objects. We're going to discuss customized logic and how to put that in place, both declaratively and programmatically. We'll talk about Apex, our programmatic language. We'll talk about Lightning Components and show the Lightning App Builder. We're going to talk about some APIs, and then we'll end up with some question and answers. Throughout this, I've tried to make sure that we've got a good balance between talking about theory on slides and actually showing demos and doing the practice of what we're talking about. And if for some reason you have to drop before the webinar is over, I want to point you at Trailhead, trailhead.salesforce.com. It's the fun way to learn Salesforce, and you can always log in there and start reading and doing and earning badges about the things we've talked about today. Or you can go to bit.ly/welcomedevs for a customized 4-hour trail mix. It'll cover a lot of the same material that we're going to cover today, but in much greater depth. So what is the Lightning Platform? That's a great question. I think the best way to answer it is to ask a different question in response, and that is, where do you want to spend all your time? Because if you want to spend a little bit of your time writing apps and most of your time worrying about infrastructure and operations, then you're probably most likely familiar and comfortable with legacy platforms. But if you want to spend most of your time making changes for your business users by writing apps and making processes faster, then you want to look at the Lightning Platform. With the Lightning Platform, you'll spend virtually no time on infrastructure or operations, and as a result, you'll be able to spend more time writing these applications. And that makes it, and the platform makes it much faster for you to do so in a number of ways. We are the #1 trusted enterprise platform, and we are that by providing a number of services out of the box for you. So we have everything from single sign-on and identity services to penetration testing and encryption on our network services, and dealing with secure data centers and doing third-party certifications for our data centers. We are the trusted platform so that you can spend your time writing apps. The Lightning Platform itself is then a secure multi-tenant platform for quickly customizing CRM applications or customer relationship management applications that you get out of the box with Salesforce, and building enterprise applications for every and any department in your corporation, from janitorial services to accounts receiving. You can write platform apps that will help those departments on Salesforce, on the Lightning Platform. To do that, we allow you to do what's called custom data modeling. Now, the Lightning Platform actually lets you create custom data structures. We call these objects. And to extend data structures, other objects. So we've got standard objects that come with our various platform applications like Sales Cloud or Service Cloud. And those standard objects you can customize by adding custom fields. You can also create net new customized objects or custom data structures to hold your own data, and modeling those out allow you to customize the data and what you're storing for your applications. So let's take a look at that. We'll dive in and look at our application that we're going to write. This is a developer edition org. You can sign up for a free developer edition org at developer.salesforce.com. And when you log into your developer edition org, you'll see the setup screen. This is what the setup screen looks like, but we're going to dive into the app we're building today as an example. And the app we're going to build today is a park management app. In keeping with our trailhead theme, we want to have we're going to write an app that'll help us manage parks and animals in those parks, such that when we have certain things happen, when we see an animal, for instance, we can trigger customized logic automatically. And to do that, we've got two objects, two custom data structures that we've put in place: parks and animals. And as you might imagine, parks stores information about the various parks in our system. We've got Dream Park and Apex National Park, and we're also storing the number of acres they are, a lead ranger, and some information about whether or not they're a protected animal preserve. Now, on the animal side of things, we're storing information what the animal's name is, whether or not it's an endangered animal, and a link to an image of that animal. And we're going to set this up so we can use our customer objects and our custom relationships to have animals associated with parks and vice versa. To do that, let's go into the setup application, and I'm going to type in the schema builder. Actually, I'm going to pull the schema builder here. I have it open in a new tab, and you see we've got our three objects. We've got park, animal, and we've got one called animal sighting. Now, I'm going to argue that we can see multiple animals in multiple parks, and that means that we've got a many-to-many relationship, because a pigeon could be seen not only in Apex National Park but also in Dream Park. And so we need to be able to mark that we've seen the pigeon in both, but we also have the same. The flip side is true as well, where we can have multiple parks also having multiple animals. So we're going to have a many-to-many relationship between animal and park, and to do that, we're going to create this animal sighting object. That animal sighting object is a junction object, and a junction object has two relationships. So let's dive into that, and to do that, we're going to use our object manager. It's part of setup, and I've got an animal sighting object. Let me open that up, and we've got fields and relationships. Now, I've already got one here for animal. This is a relationship to animal, and it's a master detail relationship. In Salesforce, we've got two general types of relationships. We have master detail and lookup relationships. A lookup relationship is more of a casual relationship. In fact, it doesn't even have to be populated when you save the record. So you can have a lookup relationship that is null, that is blank. On the flip side, a master detail relationship has to be populated. It always has to be related to another record. And so we want to create our second relationship to park that is a master detail. So we'll click the new button, and I'm going to choose master detail relationship and hit next. I'm going to relate this to the park object by selecting park, and then we'll hit next. We're going to give it the field name of park as well, and you'll see that it automatically fills in a child relationship name. It's going to be animal sightings. And here we get into the field level security. Now, when I talked about the various services that we provide that you can use that the platform provides for you, one of them is robust multi-level security. And one of the basic functions of our security is this field level security settings. And what this allows you to do is to hide or make visible a field to various profiles. So we've got all these various profiles, everything from a marketing profile here to a read-only profile. And I'm going to make sure that this field is visible to all of them. And I'm going to hit next. I want to add this to the page layout. And the page layout's associated related list will be animal sightings, and I'll hit save. Now, while this is saving in the background, if we go over to our schema builder and we refresh it, we'll be able to see that we've got a new link that links park and animal sighting, and the park and animal sighting and animal links are all many-to-many. All right, so what that looks like in functionality is we can go back to our application itself and we'll choose pigeon, and we can go into pigeon, and on the related tab up here it says there's animal sightings. We don't have any, but we can click new and it'll automatically select pigeon because that's what we were on, and we'll choose park, and we've got 2 parks here. I'm going to choose it there in Dream Park and hit save, and now we've got an animal sighting of the pigeon in the park. Likewise, we can go into the parks and we can go into Dream Park, click related, and here's our animal sighting. All right, that's custom data modeling. Let's go back to our slides here. Now, one of the things that makes the platform able to help you accelerate and speed up the way you develop apps is that we have a diverse tool set for you to use. We have some declarative tools, we have some programmatic tools, or another way to say it is we've got no-code tools, low-code tools, and we've got coding tools that you can use. And we're going to look at both of those today. We're going to look at one called the Process Builder, and we're going to look at Apex Code. Now, our declarative tools, what do we mean by that is that they're drag and drop. They're not having to, you don't have to write code to use them. You'll be, making selections in the web interface. On the flip side, the programmatic things are you're going to have frameworks, object-oriented languages, and our APIs to use as well. So when we dive into this, we're going to add some, to do this, we're going to add some custom logic with the Lightning Process Builder. The Lightning Process Builder allows you to make reflexive actions. So when something happens, immediately fire a process, and that process can take actions on your behalf automatically. And what we are going to do here is we're going to set up a process that automatically marks a park as a protected animal preserve if we have seen an endangered animal. So when we're looking at our dream park here, we've got this protected animal preserve checkbox, and we want to automatically mark the dream park as protected if we see one of our endangered animals. So if we go back over to our animals, you can see that we've got a mountain lion and a Bengal tiger, and these are both listed as endangered. So if we see a mountain lion or a Bengal tiger, if we create that related animal sighting object record, then the park that they're seen in should be automatically marked as a protected animal preserve. And to do that, we're going to use, again, the Lightning Process Builder. So I'm going to go to Setup Home. I'm going to type in Builder here, and I'm going to go to Process Builder. Click New. Now this process, you get to fill out a little bit of information. So what are we going to call this process? We're going to do Protected Animal Preserve Update. And it'll automatically fill in the API name for us. And I'm going to choose this process starts when a record changes. And we'll hit save. And this is the basic process builder screen. And the way you read these is to start in the upper right where it says upper left where it says start, and then you read down and to the right. So we're going to start at the start button. We'll hit add object, and we're going to choose the object that fires off this process. And the object that I'm going to choose is animal sighting. So if I click a little down arrow, I can just click animal sighting, and I'm going to choose when a record is created or edited. So whenever we create an animal sighting record or that animal sighting record is created, we'll fire this process. And then we have the opportunity to add criteria. These diamond shapes on the left are criteria, and if the criteria results in true, then the immediate actions are taken. So let's add a criteria, and we're going to say animal seen is endangered. And we'll say conditions are met. We're going to choose a field. Now that field, it takes us to the animal sighting record, the record that automatically fired this process. But what we're going to do is we're going to use the animal related object or related record that has a little arrow next to it. And that'll let us traverse the relationship from animal sighting to animal, and then we'll be able to choose fields on animal like endangered. And endangered is a Boolean checkbox. And so if the animal sighting animal endangered field is equal to, we'll set this to true and hit save, then our immediate actions will take in. So let's take an immediate action. And we have all sorts of actions that we can take that come out of the box, everything from writing your own action with Apex, which we'll get to in a minute, to update records. And so we're going to choose update records. And we're going to say mark park as endangered animal preserve. And we get to choose the record that we want to update. Now we can either choose the animal sighting record that started the process, but in this case we want to update the associated park, so we'll choose a related record. And to do that, I'm going to go down and I'm going to select the park field and hit OK and choose. And now I can choose the field that I want to update. So in this case, I'm going to choose protected animal preserve, and I'm going to set it to true. Hit save. So that's our process. When we create an animal sighting or when an animal sighting record is updated, we want to look and see if the animal is endangered, and if it is, we want to mark the park as an endangered animal preserve. So that's what we need to do. That's our logic here. Let's go ahead and activate this, which will turn the process on. All right, now we've got an activated process, and now we're looking at parks. Neither of our parks are protected animal preserves right now, but let's go to animals, and we'll go to mountain lion. And let's create a related animal sighting of a mountain lion. And we're going to put this in the dream park and hit save. And it says our animal sighting was created. Now what kind of, if we go back to our parks and list it again, you'll see the dream park that we selected is actually now marked as a protected animal preserve. And that ability to create declaratively by just filling in some form fields and dragging and dropping allows you to very quickly create customized logic that happens to automate processes. And that's what it's the process builder, and it's a very powerful tool. You can do all sorts of other process type work in here as well. You can send an email, you can post a chatter, etc., as well as doing record updates. So let's go back to our slides here. Now let's talk about Apex. This is the flip side. Whereas the process builder is drag and drop, it's filling in forms, Apex is writing code. And if you've ever written C or Java code, you'll find Apex is very familiar to you. It uses the same sort of curly braces and parentheses and semicolons and the lines that you would expect out of a C family language. Now, what makes it different than Java or C, etc., is that it is specifically designed to work with Lightning Platform and Salesforce records and objects, etc. So there are special tools that are built into it for creating and compiling and even debugging code on the platform. So we're going to look at how to manipulate some records in Apex with Salesforce. And to do that, we're going to go to what we call the developer console. Now to get to the developer console, you go up to this little gear icon, and there's the developer console. I'm going to open it in a new tab. And let me give you a quick tour. You've got this main pane, which will show you either the code you're working on or the results of a query. And you've got a set of tabs down here at the bottom that lets you look at logs of execution or tests that you've run. You can look at and run queries, etc. And one of the things that's interesting about Apex on the platform is that you can write it in generally one of two ways. You can write it in classes and sort of a traditional let's write some software form, or you can write it in what is sort of a scripting fashion. And to show you that scripting fashion, we're going to use what's called execute anonymous. And I've got a little bit of code in here, a snippet that says system.debug. That system.debug is a out-of-the-box method that you can call on the system object, and that debug method will put whatever you send as the parameter to the logs. So if I just hit execute here, you'll see on the logs pane we've got a new log we can view, and if I double click on it, it'll open up. And there's all these details about the execution of the log. I'm going to filter down to just the debug entries, which is useful when you're debugging things. And here's my debug hello world. If I double click on it, you can see all the details about it. It ran at 1323, etc. All right, and so that's the scripting of Apex. Now let's write an actual class. In order to do some manipulation of our records here and to help build our application, I'm going to write an Apex class, and I'm going to call it the Park Animal Sighting Controller. So Park Animal Sighting Controller. And hit enter, and I'll open it up. And like I said, if you've written C or Java, this should look pretty familiar to you with keywords like public and class. And you've also got this is the name of our class, and we've got the curly braces here. Now, I don't want to have a typo ruin my good demo here, so I'm going to do a little copy and paste job. And paste in a class. Now, here we go. Let's walk through this a little bit. We've got the name of our class, Park Animal Sighting Controller, and we've got this thing you may not have seen before. This is called an annotation on line 4. That @ sign and then a keyword is what we call an annotation, and that annotation in this case is what will expose this method to a Lightning component. That @ or enabled exposes this find animal method that we find animal images method that we define here on line 5 to our Lightning component that we'll get to in just a few minutes. Now this is going to do a query, so you can use SOCL it's a query language, the Salesforce Object Query Language, and when you use SOCL, you can go and retrieve data from the database. In this case, we're going to grab the animal's name, and the animal link from the animal sighting record. And you can address related objects as well. So if you look here, we've got animal _ R, that's our related animal. We're going to pull the name field from that related animal. And we're going to grab that from information where the park is passed in. So this is a parameter we're pulling in, and we're using that parameter down here to use in our query. And then we're going to turn around and we're going to go over those results, the animal sighting results, and create a list of animals to return. Now it looks like I've got an error here. If you look at the problems tab, it'll show me that I've got an invalid type animal sighting _ C on line 8, and that seems weird. Let me look at that. Oh, it looks like despite my best efforts, I've got a typo. That's _ C. So let me get rid of one of those underscores, and we'll save this. And there we go. We've solved that problem. So that's our Apex class, and this is pretty simple. It's just going to return a list of animals that we've seen in this park. So let's look back here, and what can we do with that now? We can start using it in our user interface if we do a couple of extra steps. So let's introduce the Lightning Component Framework. The Lightning Component Framework is it's a modern framework for developing visual components that you can put on a web page, and you can use that on the Lightning platform to use Apex on the server side, and then you can use JavaScript on the client side to make that all work together. And we're going to do just that. We're going to build a Lightning component and put it on a page, and that Lightning component is going to display a list of animals images on the park. So when we're looking at the park, let's open up Dream Park here. We'll be able to see over here on the right a list of animals that we've seen here in Dream Park. And to do that, we're going to use the developer console again. We're going to create a new Lightning component. So we'll go to File, New, Lightning component, and we'll give this a name. We're going to choose, let's see, his name will do Park, if I can type, Animal Sighting. Park Animal Sighting, and we've got these component configuration options that we can choose from. So I want to go down and I want to look at these. I'm going to choose the Lightning record page. Now I'm choosing the Lightning record page because we're going to use a feature called the Lightning Data Service, and what this means is that we can use the Lightning Data Service, but this component can only be used on a record detail page or a record page. So I'm going to click Submit. Now it's created our component for us. And this component is actually 8 separate files. And the first one I want to draw your attention to is the component itself. This is where you'll be putting some XML and HTML to not only give structure to your component, but also define attributes and handlers. But then we also have the JavaScript controller. I can open that up, and that JavaScript controller is run on the client side. And we've got some other files over here that we're not really going to deal with, things like the documentation, or the style where you can put customized CSS for your component. But let's go back to our component structure here, and I'm going to do another copy and paste job so that we have a working component. And I'll put this in here. And let's walk through this. We've got a controller annotation here for our component, and that Park Animal Sighting controller, that's the Apex class we just wrote. Okay, that's good. So we're going to be able to link it to the controller that way and call controller methods. And then we've also got the implement, and it's got the force has record ID, which is what we need in order to use the Lightning Data Service. And then we've got a couple of attributes and a handler. And then you can think of an attribute as sort of a variable for the component. In this case, we've got a component named Park, an attribute named park and an attribute named animals. And we've also got a handler for initialization. And this initialize handler will happen, will be fired when the component is initialized, kind of like an object constructor in Java or C or even in Apex. So when we initialize the component, when the component is set up on the page, it's going to run the C do init method, and we'll get to that here in just a minute. But let's take a look at this force record data section. This is the Lightning data service, and what's going to happen is it's going to take and grab the park record, and to do so, it's going to grab the record ID. It's going to ask for some fields from the server side of ID and name. Those are the fields we need, and it's going to put those into the target park, the target attribute park. So when we load this page, the ID and name of the park will be loaded into the park attribute for us, and we'll be able to use that park ID, etc., in the controller, the JavaScript controller. So let's look at our do init method. Let me save this real quick. And if we go over to our JavaScript controller, let me put in an actual do init method. All right, and here's our JavaScript controller. This will be run when we initialize the component, and then we've got a function called do init. Now here we're going to define a couple of JavaScript variables, one for action and one for record ID. That record ID is going to grab the record ID from our component over here. So we can grab the record ID of the park, and we're going to create this action. Now the way this works is it's asynchronous. So we're going to create an action, we're going to add some parameters, we're going to set a callback, and then we're going to enqueue that action. And whenever that action receives data back from the server side, then the callback will be attached and run. So when we're looking at our action here, the action is going to be find animal images. And that find animal images is actually from our Apex controller. So what we're doing here is we're setting an action that is going to go call this find animal images, and we're going to put in the record ID here as our park ID, which is the name of the parameter we're calling it here in Apex. So what we're doing is we're passing the park's ID in as the park ID, and then we're going to do a callback, and that callback is when we get data back from the server, we're going to set the animals component attribute with the result of our Apex call, and then we're going to enqueue that action. So again, this is asynchronous. It happens asynchronously, and when that means is when we get the data back, it will update the attribute, not pause and wait for the attribute to be populated while we wait for the server to load. So we've created a Lightning component, we've set its JavaScript controller, and we've set it initialize to do the controller's do init method when the component is initialized, and we've got the record data pulling in the park's ID and name. So let's actually look at what you can do with that data once you've got it. Down here we've got a Lightning card. This is part of the Salesforce Lightning design system, and then we've got a little div that's got some header that says these animals have been spotted in the park, and here's where we're pulling the park's name. Now, we have a list of animals. There could be more than one animal seen in the park. So we're using an iteration tag, and that iteration tag is going to go over our list of animals, that attribute of animals, and it's going to put the image link in an image HTML tag for our list. So using this all together, if we put this on the page, we'll be able to see the list of animals that are seen in our park. So that's let's go back here real quick. Now, how do we actually get this component on the page to see the beautiful list of images? Well, we're going to use the Lightning App Builder. The Lightning App Builder is a WYSIWYG editor. That means what you see is what you get. And we're going to use the WYSIWYG editor to drag and drop the component we want onto the page. Now, we do this, you can do this with Lightning components. You can extend by creating your own Lightning components. You can use standard components, and they all work just by dragging and dropping. So let's take a look at our park page. Now, the way you get to the Lightning App Builder to modify the page is to click the little gear icon, and we've got a Edit Page button. So let's click that. Now, I talked about standard components. Over here on the left, you'll see the standard components. There's about 20 of them. Now, you can drag and drop those standard components all the way just by dragging them over there. So here's a list view. I'm going to get rid of that component, but I am going to scroll all the way down on the left, and here's our park animal sighting component. Oh, wait, I didn't drag it on there, I just clicked. let me click and drag it over to the right side column. Now you see it automatically updates. Now if you can see closely on the page, we've got the park data that we were on. We were on the Dream Park, so here's our Dream Park data showing up, our related lists, and we can actually preview this. It'll actually preview it by loading that information in and showing it to us immediately as we put it on there. So I'm going to click Save. Now, this is optional, but if you don't do it, then not everyone will see this, but I'm going to click Activation, and I'm going to set this as the org default. Oh, I already set it as the org default. Let me save it here. Now, if we click back, when we load our park page, here we can see the animals that have been sighted. We've seen the pigeon and we've seen the mountain lion, and both of these animals have been spotted in the Dream Park, so they show up right here. Now, if we go back to animals, let's put in the Bengal tiger. Let's say that the Bengal tiger has been seen in the Apex National Park, and let's save. If we go back over to parks, this updates in real time. So we can go to Apex National Park. Here we go. Now you can see our Bengal tigers that has been seen in Apex National Park. And that's the Lightning App Builder. It's pretty powerful. So let's go back and talk a little bit more about what else you can do. The Lightning platform has a wealth of tools for you to extend the platform or to integrate with the platform. We have a whole suite of APIs that you can use. So you can use data APIs, traditional data APIs like through a REST or SOAP interface. And these data APIs allow you to create records, update records, delete records, etc. And we also have some specific APIs for specific Salesforce Lightning functionality, things like the tooling API or the metadata API. These APIs allow you to modify your org shape, create fields, that sort of thing through the metadata API and the tooling API. We also have platform events. So as you might imagine, there are a lot of animals in our parks, and we might want to use platform events to pass data in at massive scale. And that data goes into what is effectively a message bus. And so you can do all sorts of interesting IoT-based visualizations with the platform events. And for instance, we might be able to tag all of the bison in one of our parks and then track their location. So we know on a map through a visualization where our bison herds are. And we also have the mobile SDKs. Now, before I get into the mobile SDKs, I want to draw your attention to the idea that when you're dealing with Lightning and Lightning App Builder, all of the pages that you see there with the Lightning App Builder are visible and useful in the Salesforce application for iOS and Android. So if you get the iOS or Android application Salesforce and you log into your org, any of your Lightning pages there will be scaled automatically, responsively down to something that you can use on your phone or your tablet. Now, if you want to do a custom application and you want to write it for iOS or Android, or you want to do both with a hybrid application, you can do that with our mobile SDKs. Those SDKs help you deal with authorization and access to your Salesforce org. They also help you provide and present, custom APIs so that you can make your own specific call outs or call ins to your Salesforce org. And I also want to draw your attention to the notion that our Salesforce APIs can be used to call into Salesforce from an external system. And you can also use Apex. We showed Apex earlier. You can use Apex to call out to an external system and grab data that way. And the last thing, one of the sweet, underused in my opinion, features of the platform is you can write your own custom API endpoints, which means that, so for instance, let's say you always need to update 2 records at a time, both a contact and a contact phone number record. You can do both of those at the same time through a custom endpoint. So with that, let's see what else we can do here. If you need to do or want to do something in your own language, say you want to write in Node or Ruby or even Java or Scala, you can write that application and run it on Heroku. Now, Heroku is part of the platform, but it has the ability to run any of the polyglot platform languages you're familiar with. So if you really like writing in Node, you can write a Node application, and you can share data back and forth either using the Salesforce data APIs or through Heroku Connect. Heroku Connect is a service that allows you to effectively mirror data back and forth between a Salesforce org and a Heroku Postgres database. So you write your Node app, it talks to a Postgres database, and that data is mirrored back and forth into your Salesforce org, etc. So this allows you to do all sorts of massive processing or do things that the regular Salesforce APIs may not support. You can write it on Heroku and run it there. Heroku is really powerful. Now, where can you go from here? You've probably fallen in love with the platform at this point and you want to learn more. So we've got a Dreamhouse application that I want to draw your attention to, and the Dreamhouse application is a reference application. It's code for a fictional real estate office who wants to sell houses, and those houses have various fields and size of the house, number of bathrooms, etc. And it also has a bunch of automated processes, and some of those are written in code, like an integration with Slack. So as soon as a house goes on the market, everyone on the Slack channel is notified. And some of them are done in Process Builder. So you can go in and see what kinds of things you can do with Process Builder as well. This is a great place to go and to dream about what's possible, as well as to see concrete examples of how to do this. And then beyond the Dreamhouse app, we have the App Exchange. Now the App Exchange is for those of you who really want to accelerate things. You want to get your business users in a good spot and solving problems immediately. It may turn out that your business need has been solved before, and that somebody is selling an application on the App Exchange that can do just that. And not only full applications, but you may also find components, Lightning components that you can drag and drop onto your pages to do specific functionality. These components and applications have all been thoroughly security vetted by our team, and you can pretty much click to install them in your org from the App Exchange. You'll also find Labs apps there. These Labs apps are put together and they're up there. They're generally free, and they're great to see what sort of deep integrations with other parts of the platform might look like, to give you an idea of what you can do. That's the App Exchange. Now, one of the greatest parts about Salesforce and the Lightning platform is the community that backs everything up. And we have the Trailblazer community at success.salesforce.com, and you can go there, log in, and talk to other people who are doing the same kind of work you are, either to address or ask questions about issues you're having or how do I solve X, but also to learn about what's coming up new in the community, where community events are going to be, etc. We also have the Salesforce developer forums. This is a traditional forum venue where you can go in and ask questions, post code, get responses back. And finally, we have the salesforce.stackexchange.com. This is a community-driven Stack Exchange site. So if you've ever used Stack Exchange for any other programming language, this is pretty much exactly what you'd expect. You're asked to make short, very specific questions. People give you very specific answers, and those answers and questions are voted up and down by the community. And lastly, I want to draw your attention to Salesforce, to Trailhead again. Trailhead really is the fun way to learn Salesforce. You can take challenges and earn badges that show and demonstrate that you've learned specific skills within the Trailhead, within the Salesforce ecosystem, and then you can turn around and share your success and talk to others on the Trailhead Trailblazer community site. So to get to Trailhead, you go to trailhead.salesforce.com. and you can sign up or log in there. And also we have these things called trail mixes. A trail mix is a playlist of sorts of various modules and challenges and quick starts on the Trailhead system that you can use to learn and be ramped up on a specific group of skills. So in this case, the bit.ly link there /welcome devs, that is a welcome devs trail mix, and that trail mix will bring you up to speed on all the things we talked about today, but in a much greater depth. And we've tried to limit it to about 4 hours long. So if you did the entire trail mix, it should take you about 4 hours and give you an idea of what you're looking at. So with that, I want to say thank you for joining us today. And do we have any questions?
We do. Thanks, Kevin, for that great presentation. So our first question is, what is a standard object?
Oh, that's a great question. So a standard object is an object that comes out of the box with Salesforce. So you buy a Salesforce license, you get certain objects for free, certain things like contact or opportunity or account, etc. These are out of the box there.
Thanks, Kevin. So our next question is, can you use a schema builder to create new objects?
Yeah, let's log into the schema builder here, and I can do, I can I don't use the schema builder very often, to be honest with you. I don't see a place to add a new one, but you can do that through the object manager. And you can create a new object by going to custom object and start filling in the label for it. So in this case, we'll call it demo, and we'll give it a plural name of demos, and hit save. That's how you create a custom object. Great question.
Thanks, Kevin. Our next question is, can you have multiple processes against the same object type?
So you can have multiple processes against the same, like animal citing, but you don't necessarily need to. Let me deactivate this, and you can do, so long as your starting criteria is the same, where you can say it's created or edited when the animal citing is created or edited, fire this process, then you can use the same criteria. You can use different criteria options to select which actions are taken. So you can have multiple processes on it, and you may choose to do that, but you can also add it or add criteria. Does that make sense?
Yeah, great, thank you. Our next question that was submitted is, what other kinds of background logic is available?
So we have a whole bunch of options that are available to you as let me clone this here, and I'll demonstrate. So you have a bunch of actions that are available to you. This Apex one allows you to fire custom written Apex. I don't have an example of that handy, or I'd show you, but you can use that to literally fire any kind of code-based process you need in the background. You can also create a record, or you can do an email alert. So let's say you've got an endangered animal that's been seen in a park. Go ahead and email the park ranger. You can do that with an email alert. You can run a flow, which is another declarative automation tool that we have. You can do a post to chatter. So if you say we've seen, let's post to chatter that we've seen an endangered animal, and the people who are following that endangered animal record will automatically be notified that, hey, we've seen the mountain lion or the Bengal tiger. You can also fire another process. So you can have a process for animal citing that goes through and chooses different things and fires sub-processes off. And you've also got quick actions and update records. That a quick action is a tool that you can use to do something very similar to what you see here, where you can create a new event, etc. And lastly, we have the submit for approval. So if you have an approval process on this object, you can submit it for approval. So that's a good dime tour of the processes, the automation that's available through Process Builder.
Great, thank you so much. Our next question is, can I code Apex on the desktop?
Yeah, you can. There's a number of options available to you. We have the force.com IDE. We also have plugins for Visual Studio Code, and there's a third-party plugin for IntelliJ's IDE. So you can use any of those three tools, and there are plugins available for them that'll connect to your org and let you write code. And then when you save that code, it's pushed up to your org. That's part of what the metadata API is used for.
Looks like our next question is, can I use Angular in my component?
Not as such. You can use Angular in a couple of ways on the Lightning platform, but Lightning components themselves aren't allowed to touch the DOM of the page, and they're run in isolation. So it's a tricky thing to do, and that's kind of out of scope for here. I'm happy to field a question about that on Twitter or on my email.
Thank you, Kevin. We have a couple more questions here. The first one is, where can I use components outside of record pages?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's look at the let's look here. Let's go into, this is a record page. Let's go into Lightning App Builder. That's not available there. Let's go to Setup. Oh, hit the wrong button. Let's go to Lightning App Builder. And we can create a new Lightning page. So you can create a Lightning page that isn't necessarily associated with a given object record. So you can do an app page, a home page, or a record page. The record pages are associated with a particular object. Let's do a home page here and give it a name. And we'll do a standard home page. And we can drag components onto all of these. So we can do a key details component over here. And this is going to be like a list of our recent opportunities. And one of the things that's nice about this is I can choose to display it or not based off of filters. So if I wanted to, I could hide this component visually if there was, if there's no opportunities, etc. You can embed quip documents. So we can, put a quip document there. I actually don't have quip linked to this org, but that's how you would do that. You can use them on home pages and app pages. Anywhere you can get to via the Lightning App Builder, you can drag these components onto. And components can also embed other components as well.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. It looks like we have one last question from the audience, and that is, can I make as many API calls that I want?
That's a good question. You can make 100 callouts from Apex per invocation of Apex. So if you are writing, if you're using an API call out from Salesforce to your own internal system or something like that, you can make 100 of those per invocation. You probably don't want to make that many, but you can. And then if you are writing a Lightning component, you can use API calls. I don't know that there's a limit on the API calls going back to your own org. I would have to verify that one. In general, calling into Salesforce with an API call is where you're limited, and you're limited, I believe the general rule is that it's 1,000 API calls per user license. And then that's your API calls in a rolling 24-hour period. So if you've got 10 users, you have 10,000 API calls. Again, I haven't looked at those limits in a while. There's a governor limit page you can view, and if you go look for Salesforce governor limits, you'll see what those limits are currently. But that's how many API calls you can generally make.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you, Kevin. Thanks so much for this presentation. That looks like that was the last of the questions. So that concludes today's webinar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and have a great afternoon.